Hello again, and welcome to Essential Exchange. This is a show that provides a place for people to share stories, info, and education that others need to hear because in times like these, communication and connection are essential. Today, we have a very special guest who is an amazing woman, an entrepreneur, and I'm sure she's going to tell you a whole lot about her story. We connected just under 2 months ago now, and we already have become quite good friends and pretty close, and have really formed a connection and a bond. And we're working on something very, very special that we will definitely be talking about. And so I just want, to let you know a little bit about Catherine and her background. She has a nonprofit called IHS, which she will talk about. And, I want to know, Catherine, like what caused you to start the nonprofit? Like what was it that made you change from, ironically, the pharmaceutical industry to holistic health? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of her accomplishments and some amazing programs that she's already um, founded and is still running some of them today. And then we're going to go into what we're kind of working on right now. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Catherine. And like I said, you just tell us a little bit about your journey to what got you to create and launch IHS.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And, like Natalie already said, her and I have connected in really a unique way, which is really the way integrative healthcare solutions or IHS kind of came to be. So, as Natalie mentioned, I've been in traditional healthcare my entire life. So, my educational background, I have a master's in physical therapy. It's all I ever wanted to do in life. And I took 3.5 years to get into school, 3.5 years to stay in school. I worked full time. I met my husband in my class. So it was all set up. Unbeknownst to us, the school that we attended didn't get accredited. And so, that really threw us for a loop. Two people in the same field, two master's degree that are really worthless, and $100,000 in student loans. So
Wow.
I reflect on that because I've been on a journey for a very long time, and that catapulted me into the pharmaceutical biotech industry. So I worked there for over 20 years. I've worked for some of the top Fortune 100, 500 companies. And what I did for the industry, so the first 10 years, I was a drug rep, pharmaceutical rep you'd see in the offices. But the last 10 years of my role as an individual contributor, but also a manager, was to lead a team of people that work with the experts. So these are the top doctors. I worked in the respiratory asthma space, in the rheumatology space. So we worked with the top doctors across the country. So I was one of four for the country for 7 years. I called them the Cleveland Clinic, Mount Sinai, Yale, Hopkins. And our role was to develop advocacy for the company and the product and to gather insights and kind of be this liaison to the marketing team and our sales force. So I never in a million years had any plans or visions of creating a nonprofit. But it's really been, I would say, the professional background coupled with my personal experiences and what I've
Mhm.
gone through that's kind of led me here. So just to highlight some of those, my brother, first of all, has been, did you want to say something? No, my brother
No,
has
no, I
been,
was just going to say if you want to elaborate a little bit more
yeah,
on your journey, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and letting us know, like, because it's kind of, it's like PT, and which would have, I imagine be a lucrative career, and then you kind of got dropped on your face. It's not accredited. What now? I need to make money. Got into pharmaceuticals, which pays very well. And
yeah.
then so what happened that, all of a sudden now, like you just switched gears, like you said, created a nonprofit that you had no intention on really starting, right? So just tell us a little bit about the story and the background. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah, and I should just add, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, I loved it. I mean, I loved it for a long period of time. I excelled at it. There's a lot of
Mhm.
amazing people that I know and the people that we served, it was amazing. And the medications you feel at the time, I actually felt like if anything ever happened to my family or myself, that I knew who to go to, I knew the best drugs, so I felt a little bit protected, if you will.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
my brother was addicted to opioids and alcohol, of all things, for 20 years. So, I witnessed that journey. I witnessed how he was treated for his
Mhm.
substance abuse disorder. And really, he didn't get anything besides opioids. He didn't get the right type of treatment. I mean, this was back in the day in
Mhm.
the 80s, but for 20 years, he had mental health issues, depression, he was in the service. All he got was medication. And
Mhm.
he never worked on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual component. He fatally overdosed in 2008. And, yeah, I took care of myself in one way, so I always worked out. I thought I ate pretty good, but I can tell you mentally and emotionally and spiritually, I was not giving any of that aspect of who I am any attention.
Mhm.
My father came down with small cell lung cancer, and I witnessed, that diagnosis and how he was treated. And, he got diagnosed on a Friday. He was told he had 6 to 12 months to live. I was pregnant with my first child. I was 3 months pregnant, and I didn't know if he was gonna live to see my baby. And he was treated with chemo and radiation for 8.5 months, and he was sick the entire time, for the entire 8 months, until he died on Valentine's Day. So I've reflected on those 2 journeys, that they
Mhm.
only got, say, a siloed approach to their condition.
Mhm.
And in 2016, 2 things happened. One, my very close friend here in West Greenwich, Rhode Island, had a little back pain. And fast forward that, she ultimately had a very aggressive form of lymphoma called triple hit lymphoma. And
Mhm.
even at that point, I was still in the medical, traditional, siloed mentality. Even though it was like I
Mhm.
was starting to get into some holistic, I started to do yoga in the past. I was getting there, but I wasn't quite there. So we
Mhm.
did everything we could, and despite everybody's efforts, unfortunately, my friend Lisa passed in 7 months, leaving her husband and 2 children, 9 and 11 at the time. And that really, like, broke me open, to be honest.
Mhm.
It was tough. It was tough to witness somebody be completely healthy, and to witness just, these are people you love, and I have 2 kids, and what if this was me? And I felt determined, like, I wasn't gonna let
Mhm.
this happen to her, and I was gonna pull every string and do everything, and we did that. And there was a plan behind the plan. So it was not her time. And I'll just kind of end that piece to say there is always a plan behind the plan, because an amazing woman has come into that family's life, and just
Mhm.
the love and everything I've witnessed. So I reflect on that and say, why was I so worried? Why did I let it bother me, mentally, emotionally? Why? God has a plan that I couldn't
Mhm.
see, right? That was behind the scenes. So I had that going on. And when it broke me open, my stomach started to hurt. So I would
Mhm.
say everything that I just talked about, I thought that was my journey, but I think one of the greatest journeys I've ever been on is I became a patient in 2016. So I was diagnosed with severe Crohn's disease, drove myself to Rhode Island Hospital, and on admission, I had a fistula, multiple ulcers, an abscess, and so much inflammation they couldn't even get it through my with a pediatric scope. So I was
So
in rough
that's
shape.
interesting. Yeah, so that's interesting. So as we talk, and I said this show is about, communication and connection and sharing stories with people that are out there, that things that they need to hear. My first husband had Crohn's severely.
Oh,
He's not with us anymore. He died at a very young age. And, it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, like, you ended up in this place in 2016, but prior to that, all of these other events that happened in your life, when you thought you were taking good care of yourself, right? When you thought you were exercising and eating okay, and that you were, kind of keeping your stress down, that
yeah,
you were okay. And the whole time, and we had talked about this the other day, your gut health
yeah.
was suffering severely until it got to the point where it couldn't anymore, and you ended up in the hospital. And so tell us about from there. So you were diagnosed with this Crohn's, you had a lot going on, and like you said, prior to that, you were, all about, medicine and the normal medical that we kind of
Physical.
all go to, physical, yep, our physical health, and going to a doctor, being seen and treated with prescription medications, right?
Yeah,
So tell us
yeah.
about what happened from the hospital, your diagnosis, to moving forward.
It was a very eye-opening experience, I have to be honest. I
Mhm.
was actually shocked. I don't wanna say depressed, but at a certain point in time when I witnessed and experienced, because I had all this education, right? I came from the pharmaceutical industry. So as I laid
Mhm.
in my hospital bed and I
Mhm.
got to experience how physicians talk to patients about medications, what they say, what they don't say, um,
Mhm.
I was shocked. I sold some of these drugs that they were now telling me I needed to be on, heavy duty medications such as the biologics,
Mhm.
and they didn't even tell me about the side effects that I knew. I knew people who actually
Right.
came down with some of these side effects. So that was shocking. I couldn't believe it. And the entire time, I kept saying, "Well, what else is there? What else can it be?" And every answer, and I went for second opinions because this was my job.
Mhm.
That's what I
Yep.
did. I know who to go to, and I couldn't believe it. Everybody I went to, the only answer they ever had was medication and more medication. And so something inside of me, truly, I just kept saying, there has to be something else. Has to be. And
Mhm.
so much so that I actually canceled my first infusion because I was already had an appointment to get an IV
Mhm.
medication. I was that bad. And I was feeling great. And I truly felt like there was a better way. And I felt like I was being, spiritually, like someone was watching over me. And
Mhm.
the pain came back. And so I finally just said, okay, I guess I have to do this. Guess I have to go on this medication and for whatever reason. So I
Mhm.
spent a year of my life, all of 2017, on an infused biologic, so every 8 weeks.
Mhm.
And this was the number one gold standard product for fistulizing Crohn's.
Mhm.
And the entire experience, just I intuitively, I hated it. I hated going. I would show up and I would lay there and I would meditate. I'd put my headphones on and I just always had this sense. I'm like, this isn't even doing anything. I don't even know why I'm on this. But it just naturally came from me. It wasn't
Mhm.
like I was trying to push this narrative. It just flew out of my mouth.
Right.
Like, I don't even know why I'm on this.
Mhm.
And sure enough, at the end of the year, the drug had zero effect on the inflammation
Wow.
in my body. Yeah.
Wow.
So my insurance company spent $171,000 that year on my care. It had
Wow.
zero effect,
Mhm.
and the only other choices I kept being given was medication. And because I
Mhm.
knew of these side effects, I actually walked away, and I loved my doctor, I should also say.
Mhm.
He's a wonderful man. He cares about me, he listens, he knows all
Mhm.
about those medications. But I walked away from that last appointment and I left on a mission. And I
I was
started
just
to
gonna
use the
say
internet.
this. Your mission was made. Yeah. Yeah.
It was made. I said, I have to figure this out. And one of the
Mhm.
key things that I did was rather than call this Crohn's disease, I kind of took myself out of the equation. So I took a step back and I said, what is the main problem that I have? My main problem was inflammation. So even though I knew what inflammation was as a physical therapist, I said, forget everything you know. How is inflammation created? Where does it come from? Oh, everything. I didn't watch TV. I didn't go on into, this was my mission to discover another way. And I did.
Doing it different, which is a motto that's kind of been coming up for you and I over and over again, right? All the things that we're talking about, which we'll probably have to have you on again because there's so much to tell, right? But doing it different and not accepting the norm, just like what everyone else is doing, and this is how it is, and this is what you have. These are your choices, and that's it. And I think both of us are kind of a little bit non-conforming when it comes to things like that. And we're like, no, I'm not okay with that. You know, I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes for a few years. And then, okay, you're just over the cusp. You need to get on metformin or you need to get on, you know, this or that. You know, I'm supposed to be on ADHD medication and Adderall. And I don't like, you know, what I say, like foreign substances. And I don't like taking medication. And I'm not comfortable with it for lots of different reasons, which is another whole story that we can get into. But same thing. I just keep saying there's got to be a different way to manage your weight. There's got to be a different way to manage your ADHD. There's got to be a different way to manage your diabetes. And we know exercise is one thing and nutrition is another thing. But like you said, it's just doesn't seem like it's enough. It doesn't work. It comes and goes. You know, you get in a good place and you're like, okay, I lost 20 pounds, and then you gain it back, or, you know, whatever. The depression comes back, or the anxiety comes back, or the whatever. So because we don't have a whole lot of time, like I said, we're probably going to have you come on again. But so that made your mission of like, let me figure out how to do it different, how to do it better, and how to do it in a way that isn't so disturbing, because you found out like, okay, they gave me this medication, they didn't explain it, they didn't tell me the side effects, and I was just supposed to accept that. And you were like, no, that's not acceptable.
Well, and
So
what's
is
all
this
this is ultimately, I mean, to wrap that long story short, is I went on a holistic journey and I found a naturopathic physician. We did all my lab tests. We discovered all these foods that I'm sensitive to. I really reflected on the past 30 years of my life. And what I discovered was I had chronic stress for 30 years. So, you know, I was still in my head. I wasn't connected here. My gut health was out of whack. The foods I was eating, I was sensitive to. You know, it's like, let me change my lifestyle and take accountability for my life, not just my stomach, right? And let me take accountability for my life, and let me every day, one step at a time, be open to trying different things. What about my energy? You know, I've worked on my physical health for so long. What about my mental health, emotional, spiritual health? What does that mean? How does that look like? So I followed this through, and I follow it today, and it's how I live today. I'm 3.5 years out. I'm on 0 medication. I have no evidence of disease in my body. And in 1 year, I saved my insurance company of $171,000 in 1 year. So that,
amen to all of that.
yeah, right? But I sit here because I didn't know what I didn't know until I got sick. You know, it took this crisis to come through for me to have my back against the wall, to really say, what am I going to do? And I didn't want to live on medications. And so while I was on my healing journey, I got invited to go to a meeting, and the meeting was on non-opioid treatment options for pain. And for whatever reason, I just felt, because of my brother's history, I wanted to go check out the meeting. And when I went, and that's where I got to see Tom Kadir and Kasim Yarn and Dr. McDonald and all of these real thought leaders in the state and what they were doing for addiction. And I just couldn't help but to want to know more. and to better
Mhm.
understand, like, what are they working on, and given my pharmaceutical and biotech background. So I I followed that path and I met with all of them and I just tried to catch up to what they're doing. And really, it was Tom Kadir who asked me and said, "Catherine, what do you think you could do?" And I just kind of
Mhm.
had this crazy idea in my head that given everything I've experienced, we have two sides of healthcare. We have our
Right.
traditional medical side and we have our holistic side. And then we have our own self care, right? That piece of
Mhm.
us taking care of ourselves and each other. And from where I sat, it's just taking too long. Like, I'm not saying both sides don't play, but they really don't, right? This integration of all sides coming together. And I said, I have this crazy idea for a nonprofit, and it needs to be nonprofit. It's not about
Mhm.
making money. There's people are suffering right in front of our eyes. And so
Mhm.
I started this crazy idea, and all of those people said to me, "Catherine, it's not crazy." They said,
Mhm.
they supported this initiative and they said, "We have money for this. Like, you're the one to figure this out and to try this." And so I never expected this, but I just followed kind of this path. And in the first year, won a $50,000 grant to prevent addiction and overdose. So I worked with a primary care office from Rhode Island Primary Care Corporation, and I
Mhm.
got integrated right into one of the practices right in East Greenwich. And it was a 6-month grant to take this idea that was in my head and bring it far along to actually work with patients in their
Yeah.
office and to see what we could
Mhm.
accomplish. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. I did not have a lot of time, and we were able to actually create a whole program. We did over 11 educational programs. I had 28 patients go through the process. I created my 501(c)(3, the website, the materials, this collaboration.
And
And
this was
the
in a
interesting
short amount of time. This was like
6 months.
less 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. And what's
Mhm.
wild is it was in 2019, so this was obviously before the pandemic,
Yeah.
and back then, we were saying things need to change, things need to be
Right.
different. And
Right.
and what's crazy, the grant ended January 2020, and then
Hmm.
COVID hit,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
And like
when
we've
that
had
ended.
lots of conversations. Go ahead. Sorry. With that ending, what
No, go ahead.
happened? Oh,
No,
I
I
was
was
gonna say
gonna
we've
say
had
that
lots of
ended.
the delay. There's a little bit of a delay, so that's why we're interrupting each other, and we don't know who's up next. We've had a lot of conversations about doing it different. We've had a lot of conversations about what needs to come together, and so my role as a mental health worker was a new role in the hospital. We've talked about this, and you're talking about how like they don't have medical and mental health or emotional health and all these things together. You would not believe the great divide in medical and mental health when they are one. Like you were talking about, like when you're stressed from like, your brother's addiction, which led to a tragic death, and, watching your father go through, cancer, and then your friend, and, all of this stuff that, yes, it affects you because of the stress, but then mentally it affects you because you're overwhelmed and, you're just dealing with the burdens or the emotions that go with it, and so it is all connected. It is
Right,
so connected that I don't know how they ever disconnected it. And I'm starting to
right,
learn a little bit that there were places and clinics that had all of this under one roof. So I don't know what happened, when it happened, but we need to figure that out, and why it happened, because it should have been progressing forward. And that there's a story behind it. There's a reason, whether it's insurance or whether it's, pharmaceutical or whether it's politics or whatever it is. Um, but it's nice to see that they're starting a little bit to integrate it, and they're starting to, really put mental health at the forefront, and understanding that there's really a deep connection there. And then, like you said, with the holistic, it's not just physical, it's not just mental, it's emotional, it's underlying, it's spiritual, and spiritual is whatever you want to call it, and people, um I think we've had conversations about this too, that, you know, we kind of had set in stone, like, this is how you do your spiritual life, right? You don't do crystals, or you don't do cards, or you don't do this or that. And it's the same thing. It's like, well, just because that works for me, that it doesn't mean that that's what's going to work for you, right? You may use something that grounds you, that, you know, helps you to be calm. And for me, it would not work at all, whether it's because I have ADHD or because I have a different belief. So who are we to say, don't do it that way, do it this way? Because that's exactly what happened with medical medicine, right? It was, this is how we do it. There's really no
Yeah.
questions asked. You have this problem, you get this diagnosis, you get this prescription. You know, and
Well, and
that's about it.
and in today's world, I think we're spending so much time trying to argue about this clinical trial, that clinical trial, and right at the end of the day, right? First and foremost, we as individuals, the greatest thing we need to
Mhm,
do is start taking care of ourselves. And it's our whole self. We need to
mhm,
take care of our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual self first and always, because I
mhm.
could tell you when I was not well, my whole household doesn't well. I had to go off on medical
Right,
leave from work, right?
right.
I wasn't in the community. I wasn't. So it starts like anything. You have to have that strong foundation. And what happens
Mhm.
oftentimes is we have that guilt, right? And we think, well, I can't do that. And I can't. No, it's actually the reverse. And it's
Yes.
only because I was in crisis mode, right, that I
Yeah.
had to kind of
Yeah.
put the hammer down on myself. I had to put it on myself and I had to put it on everyone around me and say, you know what? This isn't selfish. I can no longer afford to not take care of myself.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm so grateful for is now that I am well, I mean, look at it. We're still under tremendous amount of stress, right? Look at the last 2 years. The whole world is
Mhm.
going through this. And so, you know, I always knew integrative healthcare solutions. I started it to help with pain management and to prevent addiction and overdose. But I always knew that wasn't going to be a siloed group because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you know, first of all, I'm here to help people. That's
Mhm.
bottom line. I just want to help people. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see people be well. So, however, I can help, whether it's connecting you to a different specialist, bouncing an
Mhm.
idea off of me, one on one health coaching. You know, I have a whole certified health coaching team. So, we do our
So
own
talking
individual.